Hey, everybody, how's it going? Also, I forgot to mention though, if you do want to connect and you're not connected, if you don't know how to get connected, there's like these little things called, hey, come get connected. And you can just fill or look at that and you can find us on where's the website, what Remind is, how you get updates, follow us on Instagram, all those places. Because there'll be something up about what we're doing or what's going on or what's new in the building. I wasn't looking at anybody, just saying. So we are in the book of Galatians. If you don't know where we're at, this is what we're doing on Sunday morning. That's what we're going through. We're going through the book of Galatians. We'll be going through it for a little bit at least. And this last week for me has been like a really funny week because it started on Wednesday when I started reminiscing about like what it was like in high school, and I was playing like before the hangout time on Wednesday nights, like before 6:30. I was out there with Esther, right? Where's Esther at? Not here? Okay. She was here. But I was out there with Esther and like I just started flipping through like these playlists of what I would listen to in high school. And I remember listening to them, and then we came to a song where I just started like cracking up at myself because it was a moment where like as an adult I realized like how insecure I was, like how many problems I actually had as a high schooler. And it brought me back to my junior year of high school when I was having troubles with my girlfriend. Like we weren't communicating or we didn't get along very well, or I felt like I wanted to get out of it, but I didn't know how to get out of it. And so one of my friends that was a girl was like, you know what you should do? You should find a song that really resonates with you, that really makes like encompasses how you feel, and like play that song for her. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And so I started listening through all these playlists that I had, and back then I was a lot of like screamo and like emo stuff. So I was like, man, this is really deep. There's a lot of songs I could choose from or whatever because I'm feeling really like not good. And so I remember we're sitting in her driveway, and I was like, she's like, what's wrong? Like, what's wrong with us? We're kind of in this funk or whatever that is. And I was like, okay, well, listen to this song and it'll explain it all. And I remember playing the song and then being like, I was like, yep, that's exactly how I feel. Yep, that's good. This is so clear. I don't know how she's not going to get this. And then by the end of the song, I was like pause. She's like, well, I was like, what did that even mean? And then I looked at her, and this is where my insecurities, I realized how insecure I was. I was just like, nothing. It means we're great. Like, that was the end of the conversation. She's like, I don't know if that's right. I was like, no, I feel fine. Like, that song was really saying, like, how good it felt to be with you. And, like, it was, like, so insecure of me to be, like, I felt one way, and I completely was, like, flopped. I was just like, yeah, this song, we're perfect. She's like, I don't know. But it went on. And then, also, it was my wife's birthday, and so we started reflecting like what life was back 10 years ago for her, because around 10 years ago, I mean, we started dating, I guess, but we've been friends for a really long time. And so before we were friends, I was like, so what was 10 years ago like for us? Like, what was 10 years like for you? Like, what slang words were you using? What music were you listening to? Like, all this stuff, like, what was going on? And so we started thinking about all these things of like where life was back then, of how simple it seemed, of how easy it was going, and like all this stuff, like, man, having kids and like being married like changes a whole bunch of stuff. She's like, yeah, before kids and before I was married, I could just do whatever I want with the people I wanted to do it with. And I was like, what does that mean about me? Like, you don't want to do life with me anymore? And so I was like, it was just a weird time of reflection of like, you know, looking back and saying like, there were a lot of times, a lot of instances, especially for me in high school, where I was like, man, I realized how insecure I was. I realized like there were a lot of things that I would rather not go through again, just because I didn't like feeling insecure. I didn't like to feel like, man, I thought I put on this face of like knowing it all, of feeling like I had things under control, but then there were those pockets, those moments of being like, okay, I really don't get it. And I know that everyone else is faking it too, or at least I know that now. And so it was like this weird thing though of like, you know, finding friends. I mean, I shared this story a few weeks ago. Like when 9th grade came, I had this whole struggle of like trying to figure out where my friend group was, what they're looking at. And if you guys remember my friend Jorge, he was the guy who looked at me and said, why are you even here? I was like, okay, that's really hurtful. Why'd you say that? But it brought me to like this sense of like, okay, I ultimately found friends. I ultimately felt safe with a group of people. I ultimately felt like this is where I belong. These are my people. And so to think back then and be like, okay, would I trade that moment of feeling secure to go back to a place where I felt insecure? To go back to a place where like I didn't know how to express my feelings, or I didn't know how to express to my friends like this is what I want, or I didn't even know how to express to people this is where I stand on certain things. Would I want to go back to those places at all? And for some of us, it's that quick answer of like, Well, no. Why would any of us want to go back to a place where we don't know where we stand? Why would any of us want to go back to a place where we don't know how to express something, or when it's harder, or when it's confusing? We figure out things a little bit more as we go, as we get older and stuff. Why would we want to go backward? Why would we want to go to a place where we just don't know, where it's not as good as it is now? Why would anyone want to do that? And for some of us, though, I think the problem is that with our insecurities, what happens is that we will ultimately go back to places where they're not as good. Where we say, okay, this is a secure thing, but it's new for me. I don't understand it quite yet, so I don't get it. People are just accepting me. I'm in this place of like, God, okay, even with your relationship with God, you enter in a place where you're like, okay, God accepts me for who I am, for nothing I can offer. That's why he loves me. I need to go back to somewhere I know, even though it's not as good. And so to think back of you going back to a place where it's not as good is a hard thing to think about, but sometimes that happens because of insecurities that are within us. That things have been a certain way for so long that that's the only thing that we know, and because it worked one time, it must work all the time. We will go back to that. Like I've said before, we've all been brought up in systems. We've all been brought up like, listen, if you do good, if you please me, if you do all those things, then I'll reward you. And if you don't reward me, if you don't please me, well, then I'm not going to give you anything. It's like this works-based system I do with my kids. You probably experience with your parents. But with God, when you enter in this relationship with God, it's something completely different. Because Jesus comes and he reveals these systems. He says, listen, you've been living in a system of you work and then you get, and then if you don't perform, well, then you don't get the things. But God comes, he says, I'm going to give you the things, even if you can't work, even if you can't perform, even if you don't prove yourself, because you can't prove yourself. In fact, I'm not even going to ask you to clean up the mess that you're in because it's already too big. I'm going to go into the mess that you're in and clean it up for you. And this is where we kind of meet the scripture today that we're going to be looking at. Again, in Galatians, there's been this whole thing of like, Paul's looking at these people, these churches in Galatia, and he's saying, listen, you once knew the truth. You guys were Greeks, non-Jews, didn't follow Jewish traditions, but you came to know Christ and you found like this is a great thing. This is security for you. But what's happened is these Judaizers, these people who were Jews, who became Christians, came into this culture and said, listen, you have Jesus, that's great. You have salvation, that's great. But if you really want to be a super Christian, if you really want to be a super Jesus follower, you got to adopt some Jewish customs. Like, what are those Jewish customs? Well, you got to, there's some dietary stuff. There's some festivals you got to look at. And plus, for guys, if you're not circumcised, you got to get circumcised. It's like, what does that mean? Well, you got to get some skin cut. I don't want to go into detail. But this is what's going on. And so they're like, wait, I don't understand, because Paul, this guy came who was a Christian killer, came over here. He became a Christian. He said, hey, this is the good news. You don't need to do anything to earn this grace. You don't need to do anything to earn this love. This is what you get. You just have faith in him, and that's what happens. And then you guys are coming in and saying, well, we need to adopt all these like Jewish traditions. Like, what's the deal here? So Paul has to come back, and he's saying, listen, those Judaizers, those people who are adding to the gospel of Christ, they're not saved by the law. You're not saved by how well you perform. You're not saved by how much you can do. Again, remember how great it was when it was just God, when it was just grace, when it was just love? That's where you need to sit. Because once you start adding in rules and things you need to do and shouldn't do and all that stuff, and that's what you base your salvation on, you have no salvation at all. You have no good news at all. Again, the law was a really, really good thing. These Jews that were pointing to these new Christians to the law, yeah, there's some good stuff in there, but it's out of context. It doesn't make any sense for them. They're not Jews. It would be weird for you to be invited to my house or part of my bigger family where everyone's Mexican and you guys aren't Mexican, and then say like, oh, you didn't know you're not supposed to do that? Yeah, don't do that. Like, that'd be really weird because you're not Mexican. And it'd be really weird for any other tradition. It'd be really weird for any other, culture for you to do that. So these Jews are saying you got to obey Jewish culture when you're not a Jew. And this is where the conflict arises. This is what Paul is writing about. He says, and we've likened it to, the law was a really, really good thing. It pointed people to God. It gave you a measuring stick of how close you were. If you wanted to get close to God, you could follow these things. But again, this isn't the cure. This isn't the problem solver. It's the MRI machine. You go into an MRI machine, it shows you your tumor, but that's all it does. No matter how many times you keep going to that MRI machine, it's not going to cure you. What's going to cure you is coming out of that and going to the doctor, the great physician, the specialist, the person who's actually going to fix you. And that's Jesus. So again, when Paul looks at these people, he says, listen, you can keep going to the MRI machine. You can keep seeing what's wrong with you. And yeah, you'll find out what's wrong with you, but you'll never be healed. You'll never be whole. You'll never have that hole in your heart that's filled. The only way that's done is by Jesus. And so we come into contact finally where he starts to break it down. He says, listen, you are my people. I came to you guys when you were in need or when I was in need, and I gave you the good news, and you found Jesus. You were my people. You were my friends. You were my family. You were my spiritual brothers and sisters. You were all these things. But I see you slipping back into old ways. I see you slipping back into ways you don't even understand. And he's pleading with them now. He's giving him the logic of like, listen, why would you want to go back to something that's bad? Why would you want to go back to something that's almost flawed? Why would you want to go back to something that's not as good as what you have right now? He's asking these questions. And then he gets to this part where he says, listen, I just want to plead with you guys. And this is where we pick up in Galatians 4. Formerly, when you did not know God, you were slaves to those who are by nature are not gods. But now that you know God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you are turning back to those weak and miserable forces? So again, he's asking that question. Listen, before you knew God, you were in this kind of miserable place, this cycle, this thing that we all know of, like if you work, then you're going to get rewarded. If you work better, if you work harder, you're going to get more of a reward. This cycle of like, what is it that we need to figure out to get what we need? You're in this cycle, and it's like, why would you skip on that? And like I love this part where he says, but now that you know God, or rather that you are known by God, it's like this whole idea of like, listen, those people who were following the law, they knew of God. They had some head knowledge of God. But now it's like God actually knows you, that you are known by him. There's this like transfer of information of like, I know it in my head, but now I know it in my heart, that I just don't know God, but now God knows me intimately, that there's this relationship now, that he can actually speak into my life. He's not just a stranger. He's not just this list of things or these lists of things that I need to do and cross up, but no, there's a relationship there now. There's intimacy. He knows me. I just don't know him. He's actually reaching down to me rather than me trying to reach up to him over and over and over again. I don't have to walk on eggshells anymore. I don't have to prove myself that I'm worthy or accepting or sorry, I forgot the word, but whatever the word is, I don't need to prove it anymore, that he comes down and he knows me. And it continues. You wish to be enslaved by them all over again? Again, you want to go back to the system of doing the stuff, and not knowing where you stand, so you do more stuff, of, again, failing, and then saying, like, I got to go back to the drama. You want to go back to this old system? You are observing special days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you that somehow I have wasted my efforts on you. Again, this is a super emotional part for Paul because he's poured so much into these people, and these people have probably poured so much into him that there's this relationship now going on that and when you think about it, when your friends are pouring into you and you're pouring into them, and when they do something that hurts you or they betray you in any way, how hurtful is it that you just want to scream and yell and be like, why'd you do that? Why are you going back to that guy? Why are you going back to that friendship? Why are you going back to those old ways? You have something better. I've told you this before. You don't need to do that anymore. You don't need to go and do that. You don't need to impress those people. You have something better. And this is your first feeling. This is Paul's fear. The fear is that we would chase our insecurities instead of security. This first part that we read about of Paul saying, like, why are you going to go back to those places? Why are you going to do those things? You're observing these weird seasons and months and holidays that don't even apply to you. Why would you want to do that? I fear I've wasted my time on you. This is his fear, that we're chasing our insecurities instead of security. That we're going back to those old ways because, we're insecure. We want to prove ourselves. We want to say, I'm enough. I deserve this. But God works differently. And Paul's telling that to them. Paul's saying, listen, you don't have to go back to those old systems. You don't have to go back to the thing that you know, because this is something completely new. Here's the doctor finally giving you the cure. Here's the doctor to finally free you of your pain. Here's the doctor to finally free you of this system that doesn't work. And I fear that that's where you'll stay, that you'll keep chasing your insecurities instead of, grabbing hold of what's secure, of what's already there for you. And it continues to break down. Verse 12, it says, I plead with you, brothers and sisters, become like me, for I became like you. You did me no wrong. As you know it, it was because of an illness that I first preached the gospel to you. And even though my illness was a trial to you, you did not treat me with contempt or scorn. So when we look at this, some people say like Paul had an actual illness, and some people say that was really gruesome and disgusting. Like maybe he had an eye infection of some sort. Like it was like weird and like pussy and gross and stuff. So it was like not a pleasant surprise or not a pleasant view to see him. And so these people brought him into their houses. These people brought him in knowing that he looked gross, that people didn't want to touch him, didn't want to be around him, or whatever it was, didn't want to interact with him, that these people brought him in. And he's saying, listen, we have this relationship. When I was at your house and when you were at my house and we were having dinner and we were talking about your sister, your mother, your brother, and those hardships that you have, that there's this like break in relationship. When we were having those long talks in the middle of the night when no one was around, we got real for a second. You brought me in and I brought you in and I loved you and you loved me. Remember those times? I just want you to think back for a second. Think about the relationship we have and think about what I'm saying to you. I'm not saying this to you because I'm high and mighty. I'm saying this to you because I love you. I want to plead with you, brothers and sisters. Again, let's think back to the relationship we have. Let's think back to what we've built. Let's think back to what we actually have right in front of us. Instead, you welcomed me as I was an angel of God, as I was this beautiful thing. You said, I don't care about this pussy eye that you might have. I don't care about the sores you might have. You're an angel of God to us, and that's how you welcome me. Or if I were Christ himself, where then is your blessing of me now? Where's this relationship at now? Why does it feel like it's going on deaf ears? Why are you going back to something that's not as great as what you have right now? I can testify that if you could have done so, you would have torn out your eyes and given them to me. Have I become your enemy by telling you the truth? Again, he's just pouring out this relationship of what they built. At one time, we were so close that, you saw my infection. You saw what was going on with me. And he said, I would rather tear your out eye and tear my out eye to put it back in yours, as that's how much I love you. I would tear off my arm. I would tear off my limb. I would take all this pain that you're feeling if you didn't have to feel any. This is the type of relationship that he built with those people. And so he's asking them, what's going on? I showed you something marvelous and wonderful and pure and gracious and loving and all these things that you want, the things that you're looking for. Why are you just throwing that away? And this is his plea to them. Think about what you're chasing. Think about what you're chasing. Not only people of Galatia, but you right here. What is it that you're chasing? For those people, 2,000 years ago, they were trying to seek some peace. They were trying to figure out, what does it mean to connect with something bigger than yourself? What does it mean to connect with the light? What does it mean to connect with God, this unbeknownst being to them? Like, what does it mean to connect with that? What does that look like? So they chased it through laws and figuring out, walking on eggshells. What is it that I need to do to prove myself? And what are we chasing today? And I'm going to tell you, it's the same for everybody. We're looking for purpose. We're looking for hope. We're looking for acceptance. We're looking for love. We're looking for a place. We want to have some type of purpose. And where do you find those things? What is it that you're chasing? We all have those basic needs of wanting to be loved, wanting to be accepted, wanting to have purpose, wanting hope to continue on to the next day. And the big question is, where are we seeking those things? Are they in relationships? Are they with friends? Are they with family? Are they performance? Are they excelling in school or in sports? Whatever those things might be. Is your identity wrapped up in those things? Because I can tell you, all those things that we're chasing, they're found in God. The hope, the purpose, the love, the acceptance. All of those things, they're going to be wrapped up in God. Because if you're seeking any of those things in anything else, you're going to be in this cycle just like they were. Of trying and failing and trying and trying and failing, going back to the drawing board. Walking on eggshells. You don't know where you stand. You don't know where to go. Trying to figure it all out. And then finally, the last part is the comparison. Those people are zealous to win you over, but for no good. What they want is to alienate you from us, so that you may have zeal for them. It's fine to be zealous, provided that provided the purpose is good. And to be so always, not just when I am with you. My dear children, for who I am again in the pains of childbirth, until Christ is formed in you. How I wish I could be with you now and change my tone, because I am perplexed about you. The comparison. This inclusiveness of Jesus. Paul's looking at them and says, I don't get it. First, because we understand where you were and where you came from, and then where you're at now, that there's love and acceptance and grace, not based on how well you performed. But you're going back to these old ways. You saw something great, and you saw something great, grand, and you saw, the beauty of it all, but then you're saying, I'm going to forsake that by trying harder. Because when I try harder, I get the love and the acceptance and grace. And Paul's saying, you already had it. That love and grace and acceptance isn't based on your performance. It's been something that's been given to you because he loves you. Because there's a relationship built there. And then he starts to plead with them. I don't get it, guys. We had something deep. I wouldn't lie to you. You're my brothers and you're my sisters, and we have this tight-knit thing going on. I'm going to be open and honest, and I'm going to share, and you're going to share, and it's this beautiful thing. I don't get it. And he says, listen, those people who are trying to convince you, those people who are trying to tear you away from the truth of the gospel, and they're making me your enemy, they just want to win you to win you. You're just a number to them. But in Jesus, you're more than a number. You're an actual person that he wants to invest in. See, if you remember from last week, he gave us this whole list of people, like if you're neither Jew or Gentile or Greek or any of those things, like all these titles, all these identities. And he says, listen, everyone's a child of God. That's what you should look at first, that you are a child of God before anything. Before you're a nerd, before you're a geek, before you're popular, before you're musical, before you're anything else. Before you're anything of those things, you have to realize that you are a child of God. And this is what he's pointing to. He says, listen, everything else in the world other than Jesus will put you in categories. Will put you in certain stations saying, listen, when you go to school, you know the hierarchy of people. You know where the cool kids are. You know where the LDs run when there's first trouble. You know those are the people they talk to. You know where the skaters are. You know where the drug dealers are. You know where the partiers are. You know where everyone sits. You know all of those things. But all of those identities will separate you. You're not invited to our group because you're not cool enough. You're not invited to our group because you're not tough enough. You're not invited to our group because you haven't had the invite. Those things all separate us. Those identities. But when it comes to Jesus and when he says, listen, you're all a child of God, you're all included. You're included in this bigger picture. And the thing is that we all want to be part of something bigger. And we think by performing, we think by excelling, we think by doing these certain things that'll happen. That's when, life will change for us. That's when I'll be accepted and have more friends and have more popularity or have whatever it is that you're seeking for, that thing that you're chasing because of insecurities. And it's funny that, you do this job long enough, or you're in ministry long enough, or you hang out with teens long enough, you start to see patterns come up. And it's so funny because every teenager has the same idea that they're fooling all the people around them. They have this mentality of I know what it looks like, and I'm going to put up the face, and I'm going to be tough, or I'm going to be sarcastic, or I'm going to be this, or I'm going to be funny. And it's okay, I see what you're doing. I know what you're doing. Your leaders know what you're doing. You're not very good at it. You might think you are, which is fine. But you're not fooling us. We've just been around it long enough, and you start to see these patterns developing. And for me, it's such a weird thing because I think I've been doing this, how old am I, 33? I've been doing this for 10 years now, close to 12 years now, 10 to 12 years now. And it's the same thing that happens over and over, even though they're different faces and different names and even different churches. The same people come. Those people seeking to be approved. And so they'll do whatever it takes to be approved. Those people not knowing who they are, and so they'll, camouflage or they'll chameleon themselves to the people around them. Those people who are hurting and feel that they can hide it by some means of being funny or being sarcastic or secluding themselves. Those people who claim to know Jesus, but yet they forget the people on the outside. Those people alone, sitting by themselves. That they've created this culture of like, I have my little tight friend group in church, and anyone who comes through those doors, I'm not going to see them. I'll choose to ignore them. I won't say hi to them. We see these patterns over and over and over again. And those are the things that break my heart, is when I see people forget the people on the outside. The thing that breaks my heart is knowing that people will accept Jesus, but then they'll choose to keep accepting their old lifestyle, this old system of what it is to be loved and accepted and having purpose and finding hope. They'll say, yeah, I'll choose Jesus, but it's more secure to go back to the things that I know, which is just all your insecurity. How could someone love me just as I am? Let me prove it to them. And we see it over and over and over again. And it's so funny that, we think of like the patterns that I see, at least, of like when people accept Jesus and they're like, okay, I got this Jesus thing kind of going on now, but like I understand him, but he's not working in my life. He's not doing the things that I expect him to do. And it's funny because it always has like the same mentality of like, yeah, I understand the God part, but that doesn't make any difference if I don't have, and you can fill in the blank. Yeah, I get there might be a God out there. I get that Jesus died for me. I get all this church stuff, but that doesn't make any difference in my life because I still don't have. What is it that you don't have? I still haven't found that girl. I still haven't found that friend group. I still haven't found the accolade that I deserve. I still haven't found the acknowledgement that I deserve. I still haven't found those people who will accept me. I still haven't found all of these things. And we say, hey, listen, if you get the God part, then this stuff doesn't matter. But if this stuff matters a whole lot, and I get it that it does, but if it's over Jesus, then you haven't got the God part. But I see it over and over again, that this mindset of thinking like, I know how good God is, I know what he's done, I know all those things, but none of that makes a difference if I don't have this. And when those types of thinking start to sink in, we start to see greater gaps between you and God, but not only that, we start to see greater gaps between you and other people. Because you will put yourself back into those categories. You will put yourself back in those identities and saying like, listen, if I just hang out with those cool people, if I just hang with that group, then things will start to happen in my life. When you enter into that group, you'll say like, okay, this group says like those people are out, so those people are out to me. Or if you go to another group and you say like, okay, this is what it looks like to be in this group, and this means I have to do this and do that. And if I do this and do that, then I can't do those things over there. It starts to widen and make this gap bigger and bigger and bigger. And the problem is that we all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We all want hope and community and love and purpose and all those things that make life great. We all want some part of that. Whether you believe it or not, we all want some part of that. And the thing is, how do we go about doing that? Is it by still focusing in, still like inside of me, or is it focusing on something outside of you? How does that happen? There was this girl in high school who I used to run to every Tuesdays and Thursdays, which is funny because I remember it. I know, right? Weird that was Tuesdays and Thursdays. But Tuesdays and Thursdays for us was block days. And so I was victorious late to school every single day, ever since like first grade. But Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would be late to school, and I would run into this girl because I guess she's victorious late for everything as well. Tuesdays and Thursdays were the day where our lives would meet, just running to school, like to our classrooms super late. And, it started off as one of those like weird things like, I'm walking and she's walking, like we don't make eye contact. But then after about the seventh time of doing this, or after the seventh week of doing this, you start to be like, hey, yeah, late, huh? And it's like, oh yeah, we're late. And so you start to do this more and more, and then it becomes this running joke of like, I don't even know her name, to be honest, but Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's why I call her Tuesday, Thursday girl. And so I would see her and be like, oh, late to school, huh? She's like, yeah, late to school. And like when she wasn't late, or if I wasn't late, I'd be like, that's weird, I didn't see you last week. And so like this thing of like, we see each other all the time. And then the more that I saw her, the more that I started running into her, the more that I saw her around campus. And the weird thing about her is like, she would be hanging out with people that I wouldn't think she'd be hanging out with. Because she was like this pretty, like popular, like very bubbly, very nice, very outgoing girl. And so I would expect her to hang out with people much like that, very pretty and popular and outgoing and stuff like that. But then when I would run into her at lunch, or when I would see her at lunch, she'd be with people like way out in the S buildings. If you don't know Clovis West High School, that's fine. But S buildings were like way out there. And she would be sitting with this one person and not necessarily even talking to each other, but this person would look vastly different than they did. So odd. I'd be like, that's so weird. It's like, is she tutoring them or something? Like, it'd be this weird thing. And then, I wouldn't see her, and I'd say, Tuesday, Thursday girl. And then I see her at lunch again, and again, it'd be in a different spot. Again, way off somewhere by the tennis courts or by the band room, or so, like, just where no one's at. And she, again, would be with one or two people. And I was like, what is going on? And by chance, we somehow got together in like one of these like development days where you go out and you like do development stuff. I don't know what they're called now. But I got partnered up with her, and like, it was funny because Tuesday, Thursday girl, like we're talking, and like, man, you're always living in Rose. How long has that been going on? Like forever. I was like, oh, cool, me too. But then I was like, as the day went on, we're partners. I'm like, so like, where do you eat lunch? Like, where do you hang out at? And she's like, well, I hang out in different places all the time with different people. I'm like, what is that? What do you mean? She started telling me the story of like how it started like her sophomore year of trying to figure out, like she was heartbroken for the people just sitting by themselves, eating by themselves. And like I started hearing her story more and more as she explained it, and I just like started like thinking like, man, that's a really cool thing. But I'm not going to do that. Like, that's cool for you to go out and eat with some stranger that you don't know, who sits on the outside, that you might not even have a conversation with, but that you're just sitting with them, that letting them know that they're seen. But I wouldn't do that. And it's not until I was adult that I realized, like, man, the way that she viewed life, the way that she saw people, was something that I wish I could go back and do. Because, yeah, it was fun to hang out with my friends and have those stories. But really, what was it for? How many of those people do I actually still talk to and hang out with now? 0 to none? I mean, maybe one. The world that we live in right now, your high school, your junior high career, whatever that looks like, trust me, 10 years down the road doesn't mean as much as it does now. The people you hang out with, the things that you do, the things that you are going to think that make you feel accepted and popular and welcomed and all those things, they mean nothing 10 years. But what will mean something are the people that you invested in around you. Who did you see? Who did you choose not to see? What good news did you share, if any good news? Again, Tuesday, Thursday girl, I don't know her name. But the way that she lived her life has impacted my life for the last 15 years. A person, I don't even know her name, but I would see her and how she chose to see people. I don't know if she's a Christian or not. I'm assuming she would be, to have that kind of mindset. But she saw people, and she went out of her comfort zone to make sure they knew it. Sure, she had her friends. Sure, she had her tight-knit people, but she would go out and find that person by themselves, that person on the outside, that person alone, and invest in them. And if we want to be part of building something, we all want to be part of building something bigger than ourselves. The real question is, it's really only one or two things. Are you building the kingdom, or are you building yourself? Are we building something? We are all building something, but the question is it the kingdom or is it ourselves? Is it kingdom focused or is it self-focused? Is it inwardly focused or is it outwardly focused? We all are building something. The question is, what are we building? Are we building the kingdom or are we building ourselves? Second thing is, what are you chasing? Nope, sorry about that. Are you chasing security or insecurities? If you missed the one before it, are you kingdom focused or self-focused? But are you chasing your securities or insecurities? Are you chasing your securities or insecurities? Paul has this heart-to-heart with the people around him because he sees this in them. He says, listen, I get that you want to be part of something. I get you want to be accepted. I get that you want to be, loved by the people around you, and you think by performing and doing stuff that's how it's going to happen. But Paul's looking at them and says, the things that you're doing now mean nothing to God. The thing that he wants from you is relationship. The thing that he wants from you is so that he would know you and you would know him, and not just in your heads or not just a knowledge of God, but really knowing him. Of what hurts you, what makes you happy, what brings you joy, what brings you down, and leaning into each other. That's the thing that God wants from us. And so Paul looks at those people and he says, listen, I see what you're doing. You're not hiding it very well. You're going back to the old way because it's easy. You can gauge where you are with people. And with God, it's a little messy because it's now a relationship. That there are going to be ups and there are going to be downs, and people will say no and people will say yes. But trust me, it's worth it because it's loving and full of grace. Again, when I think back to my friends, it's almost crazy to think back to say, like, would I want to go back to an old system where knowing I was loved, knowing I was accepted, knowing that I was just enough for just being who I was, would I leave that, would I forgo that for something where I'm like, I have to perform and know and prove myself over and over again? And Paul's always pointing them back and says, listen, you have something great. Don't let it go. Stop focusing on yourself and start building the kingdom. Focus on the kingdom. Don't chase your insecurities, but chase your security. So I'm going to pray for us, and then we'll have one more song.